In this example problem, we are going to make an estimate of how much bad debt exists within the receivables that we have on our books. And there are definitely many different ways to do it, but in my opinion, by far the best way to do it is the aging of receivables method, where you weight the expected percentage of your receivables you don't think you're going to collect on, or the chance any one receivable is uncollectible, if you will, based upon how many days it is overdue. So on the top, we're provided with a table, and that table is telling us in this instance what amount of receivables we have on the books in total, 212,000, and whom they are from, and how long each one of these receivables has been past due. So for Fund Zone, they've got two receivables on our books. A $60,000 one is current. A $12,050 one is 31 to 60 days past due. They owe us in total $72,050. Rinse and repeat for our four other customers. Games R Us, Bullseye, J-Mart, and KJ Toys. We all have amount of receivables from them that are been outstanding for various lengths of time. Well, to make an estimate on this, we got to make the assumption that a receivable that is current is much more likely to be collected than a receivable that is 90 days past due. A receivable that's 31 and 60 days past due is still more collectible than one that's 61 to 90 days past due, etc. So the longer something is overdue, the more likely it is it's not going to be collected. And somebody somewhere will go through, crunch some numbers, and give you, probably based upon your historical precedent, the chance that any one receivable is going to be uncollectible. And you'll have a chart that looks a little something like this that tells you what the probability is that each one of these receivables will not be collected. So for any current receivable, there's only a 2% chance we never see it. For something that's 1 to 30 days past due, there's a 4% chance we'll never see it. 31 to 60 days past due, there's an 8% chance we'll never see it. 61 to 90 days past due, there's a 16% chance we'll never collect on that receivable. And then any receivable that's been on our books and is past due by more than 90 days has a 32% chance of never being collected. And what we got to do is figure out, in this case, weighting out, receivables expected portion of collectability based upon how long they've been on our books for. We need to figure out what is the amount of bad debt, therefore, we expect we have in this $212,000 of receivables. And all you need to do, that we're going to do it down here in requirement one, is figure out how many receivables you have on the books for each time period. So we have $128,000 of total receivables that are current. We have $31,000 of receivables that are 1 to 30 days past due, so on and so forth. So all I'm doing is I'm bringing down the amount of total receivables that we have for each time frame to our chart over here. And then after that, I'm going to multiply that by the percentage of the probability, if you will, of uncollectability of those receivables. So this guy is 2%. This guy would be 4% for 1 to 30 days. 8% chance for 31 to 60 days, 16% chance from 61 to 90 days, and a 32% chance for over 90 days. I just copied these numbers down into the table, matching them to the proper time period. And now I just need to multiply the total amount of receivables that we have outstanding for that time frame by the chance of uncollectability. So weighted out, those $128,000 of receivables we have that are current with a 2% chance of never being collected means that on average, if you will, $2,560 of that won't be collected. Now, I know we don't have a $2,560 receivable on the books, but for the purpose of this thing, you're basically just making an estimate in the long run. Plus, I don't think you guys really want me to give you a table like this that's 150 lines tall with a whole bunch of different receivables on it. So let's just do that same thing all the way down the line. For each one of these, I'm multiplying the total by the allowance percentage. And I come up with those following digits. $1,240 of allowance is needed for the weighted chance of receivables that are 1 to 30 days past due. $1,280 of allowance is needed for the chance of 31 to 60 day past due receivables, so on and so forth. And then now in the corner, I can just find the total. Our total allowance needed is the sum of those five numbers that we just calculated right there. And that comes out to 11,800. So we need to get our allowance for bad debt up to 11,800. This is our target balance. Well, that's what we got to get to. That's not the amount we need to make the entry for because we probably already have an allowance for bad debt. And down here, it shows us that our allowance for bad debt currently has an $8,800 credit balance. Well, allowance for bad debt as a contra asset account should always have a credit balance. You're hoping in this case. And we want to get it to our target balance of 11,800. So how do I do that? How do I get from $8,800 credit balance to an $11,800 credit balance? I would need another credit of $3,000. And now my T would make sense. So in this adjusting entry we're going to record here, assumably on December 31st, we are going to record the bad debt expense in the same period that we made the majority of these sales for the amount of increase. I needed to increase this by $3,000. And then I'm going to increase my allowance for bad debts, a contra asset account going up by that same $3,000. And here I adjusted the bad debt allowance to target balance. And now we'd be good to go. Let's do one more of these questions with a little twist at the end. What if we went through? We did all of the same calculations that we did up above to find our target balance. What if we had a debit balance of $200? Well, how do you have a debit balance from an allowance for bad debt to start with? I mean, as the type of account it is a contra asset, it should have a credit balance. Well, this is all based on a guess. And we think that portion of our receivables is not going to be collectible. And every time we have an actual receivable that's uncollectible, we write it off by taking it out of the allowance, which means if the amount of receivables we have to write off is greater than our estimate in the beginning to begin with, well, then the balance of this allowance account is going to flip to the debit side. So in this case, that's what happened right here. At some point in the past, because you're always upping this every single period when you make your adjustments, etc., we had a guess for how much bad debt was in our receivables. And in the long run, we kept taking it out and out and out and out. And we ended up having $200 extra of actual write-offs versus what our guess was. So we got like a negative balance, if you will, which is problematic because we want to get to a target balance on the credit side, because that's where it should be, of 11,800. So how do I make this T make sense? I need to increase it by not just enough to get to that 11,800, but to also flip it. And so I need to get back to zero, if you will, on the side, which I needed $200 credits to do that. And then I needed more on top of that to get all the way up to 11,800. This needs a $12,000 credits to allowance for bad debt to make this T account make sense. And it would. If I put that $12,000 credit in, well, now my credits are bigger than my debits. 12,000 minus 200, I have an $11,800 credit balance to our allowance. So on December 31st, I'm going to record that same entry that I did up above, but now for substantially more money. We're still going to have a debit to bad debt expense. We're using the allowance method so we can record the expense in the same period the sales are made instead of waiting around to directly write them off. But if we started with that $200 debit balance, we'd be recording this journal entry for $12,000. Description, still the same. We are adjusting this bad debt allowance to its target balance. So why do I think this is the best method out of all of the GAAP approved methods? Better than percent of receivables, better than the percent of sales. It's because it just logically makes the most sense. If I let somebody borrow $5 yesterday, I think I have a pretty good chance of seeing it in the future at some point in time. This kid that I let borrow $5 for lunch 25 years ago when I was in high school is obviously never going to pay me. So the longer something is outstanding, the less likely it is that you're ever going to see it in the long run.